Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. And I am going to be sharing with you my research that has led me to incorporate note taking for comprehension and writing into my classroom. So, to begin with, let's just do an icebreaker. So something I want to do that is on my bucket list is to travel to Scandinavia, camp in an igloo, and see the northern lights. So if one of you would like to begin and share something on your bucket list, that would be great. And then we can popcorn it and you choose someone until everyone's shared an item on their bucket list. What's on your bucket list?
On the student, I guess go to Japan.
Very good. All right. No, you're a teacher, a fellow teacher. All right, now that everyone's shared, I hope we can just maybe encourage each other to check that bucket list item off in the upcoming year, or just let it be a springboard for further conversations. I just want to tell you today my vision statement and encourage each of you to have your own, since it is something that can help a teacher stay a little more focused in their classroom. So I'll just go ahead and read mine. I want to model to my students that lifelong learning is one of the intrinsic joys of being human. I strive to help all my students find purpose, inspiration, and empowerment from better understanding the world around them, and to understand that an education has far more value than simply passing a grade or test. I seek to collaborate with my fellow teachers so that my various strengths can be utilized for the greater learning of all students within my school. It is a way for me to be a lifelong learner myself, since I will learn where my weaknesses are and how I can draw upon the expertise of my colleagues to help me be more effective in the classroom. So today's meeting, I've read my vision statement, we've had a little icebreaker, and now I'd like to go on and explain to you something that I discovered in my classroom. So the problem I was finding was that my students' data showed that they were novices at summarizing and comprehending what they read. They could read a story or passage, but could not tell you in a concise and ordered way what it was about. When asked to write a story patterned after exemplars, they had no idea where to start. They did not know how to begin with a setting and characters, present a problem, and then conclude with a presentation. Actually, I meant to type conclusion or resolution to the problem. Our district standard was for them to be able to write a narrative and to become proficient in reading comprehension. So I did some research and I found a few different articles where students were tested with note-taking to see if it led to better comprehension. And in each of these listed studies, it was found that note-taking helped students order their thinking, which led to better writing, and also helped them comprehend passages that they were reading. It was concluded that note-taking encourages people to elaborate on, better structure, and organize the material being learned. Active interaction improves memory. And of course, that active intervention was putting pencil to paper and making notes about what was being read or heard. It also showed that performance improved when people more actively engaged with the information, such as writing notes. This increased engagement and facilitated more elaborate mental processing that allowed people to more accurately respond to subsequent memory test questions. So my intervention for 12 students that were sent to me is set up here. On Monday, we reviewed vocabulary words that were going to be in a passage that we read aloud. They would also, at the same time, learn a new structural model and or writing concept. So, for example, we began with fables, and they learned about setting, problem, and resolution to problem. Then we read the source text, and I taught them to take notes, 2 to 3 words for every sentence. I gave them a form to write their 2 to 3 words on, and this we called our keyword outline. Day 2, Tuesday, we reviewed the keyword outline that they made, and then they began to write a rough draft of the fable. I took away the original fable, and they worked off of their notes. They used a checklist to ensure that they were including vocab word that we had learned, a new way of adding style to their writing. So, for example, we wrote synonyms that were more interesting than what we called banned words, such as the word good. Instead, they had a list of synonyms that they came up with for the word good. So it might have been exciting, exemplary, superior, anything that was a better word than just the very overused word good. On day 2, we also studied the vocabulary words again. And then on Wednesday, we reviewed the vocabulary words with a game and finished writing the fable or composition and used a checklist to make sure that, again, they were checking off the things that were going to be part of their final draft. Then they submitted their composition or rough draft to an editor with their completed checklist attached. And the last on Friday was to write or type a final draft, making any corrections the editor asked them to make. I did not change anything for week 2. So an example of student work. This student, and I'm going to show you their keyword outline, read the passage about the Grimm brothers who wrote all of the old fairy tales. This was actually an informational passage about these brothers. Then they created a keyword outline as shown on the next slide. From this, the student was able to rewrite the informational passage in his own words. The note-taking gave him reminders and a pattern for a coherent piece of writing. This enabled him to remember the composition after the original was removed, and he wrote his own version of it from his notes. Unfortunately, I no longer have the final piece since I'm not in school, but he did recreate the piece with clarity, comprehension, and cohesiveness. So here was the original passage. The brothers Grimm grew up in a family with strong ties. Their parents taught them to work cooperatively and take care of each other. Jacob and Wilhelm also attended the same schools as they were growing up. These brothers, who lived together all their lives, even after Wilhelm married, were obviously devoted to one another. Laboring productively for over 40 years, together they collected and published great fairy tales for others' enjoyment. Truly, the loving family ties of the brothers Grimm benefited millions. And this is the keyword outline that was created by my student. So the opening statement, the brothers Grimm grew up in a family with strong ties. Then the keyword outline, parents taught work care. So they did 4 words for each sentence. And then I had taught them to use part of their topic sentence and their clincher. So this is how they're reminding themselves of that. I no longer have access to the original writing pieces, but they were not organized, nor did they follow a narrative outline. I'm speaking of the 12 students I had this past year who were sent to me because they did not do well on a scored writing piece. They did very poorly. They did not write complete sentences. They did not follow any pattern for a story. and they did not use punctuation or correct spelling many times. Retelling a story in written form was not something these 6th and 7th graders could do. They had been sent to me for remedial writing since their scores were in the novice stage. I had 12 students. All 12 students were able to produce pieces of writing that followed a narrative pattern as well as informational pieces. First, they rewrote fables and later rewrote Greek history and Greek myths. One student had to be helped a lot, but the others had all learned to write a piece from their keyword outlines, which again is note-taking. I scaffolded the process until they could all do it independently. Almost all of them earned 90 to 100% on their final drafts. I feel that this method is an excellent way to provide a model and to teach a process that they could then use for a variety of topics. Here are 2 checklists that they used. One was following a story sequence chart. This one was used more for informational pieces. So again, graded, they ended up with 90 to 100%. After looking over my students' writing pieces and their ability to recall the stories using their notes, I have concluded that note-taking is beneficial to both the writing process and to the recall of key ideas from a story or informational piece. So, as follow-up, I will continue to use note-taking to teach content and styles of writing. During my implementation of this note-taking strategy, I will continue to encourage my students to use it in other content area classes as well. In any follow-up meetings with other writing teachers, we will collaborate with one another to discover what ways we can modify this strategy. We will share written pieces of our students' work so we can analyze them to see where we can improve on our method. So my reflection is this. After 1 semester of using this approach, all my students were rewriting both narratives and informational pieces. I shared this with my teaching partner who taught the 8th grade writing program, and we met to discuss our students' progress. She came to observe my class and was impressed by my students' independent writing ability and knowledge. I shared with her my approach, and she borrowed my notes to review it for herself. She did choose to continue with a grammar approach, but later commented on how her students disliked the constant diagramming and how they were not transferring it over to written pieces. My students, on the other hand, did transfer their newfound knowledge to other classes, and they enjoyed our fables and Greek history themes. This method proved to be successful and is something I look forward to sharing in a future PLC. My next actionable steps, I will teach note-taking in other classes that I have in order to help my students with comprehension and writing. During my implementation of this best practice, I will invite other teachers to observe my students using it and provide any support they may need in order to implement it for their students. In collaborative meetings, teachers will share student writing and we will analyze it based upon our checklist rubric so that together we can figure out ways to improve the students' outcomes in meeting their state-based standards. Thank you for your time.